Okay, let's take a look at today's Parsha. Your handout is in the middle of a Dvar Torah on the Parsha. There's a sefer called La'or HaMaharal. It's authored by Avram Weinrut. He's written several stories. In this particular sefer, each Parsha, he selected a Maharal. There are a lot of Maharals. There's a Maharal Gur Aryeh al HaTorah, where the Maharal explains Rashi and Psukim. And then you have all the Sifrei Maharal, where the Maharal talks about different Psukim in the Torah. So there's a lot of Maharal in every Parsha. So Rav Weinrut picked a Maharal and worked through it in each Parsha. And that's what the Sefer is. I'm going to say over the numerous kashas that he raises and other Sforim raise about Noach's Teva. And then your handout begins with answering these questions. Okay. One of the questions we raised this week, it may have even been yesterday. Why does the Rebbeinu Shalom tell Noach to build a Teva? 300 long, 50 wide, etc. And in truth, the Medrash asked this question. All the animals, the wild animals, the domesticated animals, the birds, everything, every species, some of them 2 of each, some of them 7 of each, have to fit on the Teva. Where on the Teva? On floor number 2. The Teva has 3 floors. The bottom floor is garbage. The second floor is only animals. And the whole third floor, the top floor, is is Noach, his wife, 2 people, and Noach's 3 children, and their 3 wives. So altogether, we have 4 couples. We have 8 people living on the top floor. So the top floor, which is the same size as the second floor, the second floor has at least 2 of every species in it, and the top floor has 8 human beings in it. That doesn't seem to be a logical distribution of space. You have all these animals that no way can fit onto the second floor anyway. We have 8 human beings on the top floor. Okay, question. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell him to build it this way? You can make a little private suite for 8 people, and you need more room for the animals. What do you have to say? You have to say that the whole thing's a miracle anyways, that to fit all these species in the Teva is a miracle. And the Ramban points this out, Nachmanides. So if it's a miracle, why tell him to build something 300 by 50 by 30? Why just tell him to put a couple of boards together and everything will fit in by a miracle? It'll be a miracle if it's 300 amos long. It'll be a miracle if it's 10 amos long. But the 300 amos long takes 120 years to build. What are you bothering Noach for 120 years to build this Teva? Rashi raises the question. Ramban, others raise the question. The question was already raised in the Medrash. So one question is, why are we giving 8 human beings the same space that we're giving every species on planet Earth? The kosher species, the non-kosher species, 2 of each of the non-kosher, 7 of each of the kosher. Second, why are we tasking Noach to build such a huge Teva for 120 years if it all comes down to a miracle anyways? Next, third, what exactly am I supposed to take out from this parsha from Noach? So remember last week we learned the first Rashi in Chumash. Rashi asked if the Torah should start in Parshas Boy and Achodesh Elochem because the Torah is a mitzvah book. It's not a story book. So why is the Torah telling me God created the world in 6 days and Adam ate from the Eitz Hadas, Cain killed Hevel, and then Noach? Just start Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lema, and here are the mitzvahs. So Rashi told us, the whole Chumash Bereshis and the beginning of Chumash Shemois until Parshas Bois to teach you that Eretz, that God created the world, He's the sovereign of the world, and He gave us Eretz Yisrael forever. And if the Goyim ever come and say we stole land, we say, excuse me, please, God created the heaven and the earth, and He gave us Eretz Yisrael. It was His to give away, and He gave it to us permanently. Zay gesund, leave me alone. That was the Rashi. So, as we mentioned last week, it's a kashi ask on every parasha. Why do I need Parshas Noach here? What am I supposed to learn from it? Rashi's answer would be the same thing. God's the sovereign of the world, and He does with the world as He wants. And there came a point in time where He said, I'm going to destroy the world because they are acting in a way that is not consistent with what I want human beings to look like. So I'm going to wipe them off of the planet, leave Noach and his family, and start again. I am the sovereign. Okay, so we get that message in Parshas Noach. God, the same way in Parshas Bereshis, when Adam did not act according to God's commandment, Adam was chased out of Gan Eden. He couldn't live in Gan Eden. God gave him Gan Eden. When he didn't act appropriately, God threw him out of Gan Eden. You can't live in a place unless God tells you you're allowed to live there. It's God's world. You come Parshas Noach, that's God's world. Instead of God chasing people, he wiped them off planet Earth and started with Noach and his family. So we get that same basic idea. What is there a more in-depth lesson that I'm supposed to get from Noach, his kids, the animals, the Teva, other than God's sovereign and He wiped people off the planet Earth? What can I learn from Noach, his family, and the building of the Teva? Here's a very interesting question. At the end of Parshas Bereshis, it says that this one gave birth to this one gave birth to this one. He lived so many years, then gave birth to this one. We have the whole yichus there until we get to Noach, and then we have Parshas Noach. Before Noach, people were having children at the age of 100, at the age of 120, different ages. When we get to Noach, it says at the age of 500, Noach started having children, Shem, Chum, and Yefes. What order he had them in is a machlokes Rashi and the Ramban, who's the oldest, who's the youngest. We're just going to go as the pasuk says, Shem, Chum, and Yefes. The first of these children, whichever one they were, is born when Noach is 500 years old. So Rashi asks, quoting a medrash at the end of Bereshis, why the earlier generations have children and at earlier periods in their life, and Noach didn't have children until he was 500 years old. So maybe you want to give an answer. He didn't get married till he's 500. The Medrash doesn't give that answer because I guess even in those days, 500 was a little old to get married. So why didn't the Rabbanu Shalom let him have children till he was 500 years old? So Rashi quotes the Medrash and says, the Rabbanu Shalom did a tremendous chesed here with Noach. Because either way, there's going to be an issue. If Noach has children before he's 500 years old, remember the Mabul occurs when Noach is 600 years old. So between Noach having children and the Mabul coming, there's 100 years. So how old is Noach's oldest child at the Mabul? 99, maybe barely 100. Noach is 500 when his oldest child is born. The Mabul's at 600. It's about 100 years. So his oldest child could be maybe 100 or 99. So Rashi says, if the Rabbanu Shalom would have allowed Noach to have children before he's 500, one or two things would have happened. Either Noach's children would have been Rishoyim, and if they were Rishoyim, Noach would have had to watch them die in the Mabul. The Rabbanu Shalom didn't want to do that to him. So, for example, if Noach had a child at 400, that child would have been 200 years old at the Mabul, and that child would have died in the Mabul if he was a Russian. On the other hand, if that child who's a Rush is born at 500, he won't die in the Mabul. Why? Rashi explained, because in those days, the Dinei Shamayim were only for people 100 or older. Like we talked today about a mitzvah, 13. In those days, for whatever reason, the whole separate subject, Rashi says, from 100. So if Noach had a child at 400, that child would have been 200 at the Mabul. If that child was a Russia, Noach would have had to watch his child die in the Mabul. Hashem didn't want that. So the oldest child is born when Noach is 500. And therefore, at the time of the Mabul, even if he's a Russia, he won't have to die in the Mabul. On the flip side, if he has children that are tzaddikim, they're all tzaddikim, he's not going to have place on the teva for them. He's going to have to build a bigger teva. This is what Rashi says at the end of Parshas Bereshis. So let's think about this for a moment. You have a teva. The middle floor, the second floor, is going to fit millions of animals and birds on it. It's a miracle. The top floor is 100 amos long, 50 amos wide. That's a nice amount of meterage. And how many people are we putting on there? 4 couples, 8 human beings. A world of area for 8 human beings. So the Medrash says that if Noach's children would have been tzaddikim, right, and they would have gotten married and had children, Noach would have had to build more tevas, because how would all these human beings fit onto the teva? What are you talking about? The whole teva right now is only 8 human beings on the top floor. In the middle, same floor, same size floor. They're fitting millions of animals. Okay, so this either way doesn't seem to work. Noach had children when he was 500 as a chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because if his children would be Rishoyim and they would have been born earlier, Noach would have had to watch them die in the Mabul, because they would have been older than 100. And if they turned out to be tzaddikim and he had a lot of children, how would he fit them on the teva? He'd have to build more tevas. What do you mean have to build more tevas? There's only 8 people on the top floor. On the middle floor, there are millions of animals. Okay. How long did it take Noach to build the teva? 120 years. Noach started building the teva from when he was 480 years old. Rashi tells us at the end of last week's parasha. The Torah says that Rebbeinu Shalom said, I'm going to wait 120 years to see how mankind turns out. So he waited 120 years. The Mabul occurred at the year 600 of Noach's life. The pasuk in this week's parasha. So if the Mabul occurred at 600, and Hashem said, I'm going to wait 120 years to see what happens, that means Noach started building the teva when he's 480 years old, or Noach started building the teva 20 years before he had his first child at 500. Okay, so Noach starts building the teva at the age of 480. He's building it for 120 years till he's 600. The Mabul starts. Rashi, the Medrash, asks, as we asked earlier, why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu troubling Noach for 120 years to build this teva? Either way, it's a miracle. You can't fill the second floor with millions of animals and birds. What do you have to do? God has to make a miracle that all these millions of animals and birds can fit into a teva that's 100 amos long and 50 amos wide. Miracle. And this takes 120 years to build. Remember, it's Noach and the 3 boys. No one else is helping him. The other people, Rashi tells us, the other people in his generation are Rishoyim, and they actually want to kill Noach for even talking about. Noach is lecturing, Rabbi Isa, you need to do tshuva, because I'm telling you, there's a Mabul coming, do tshuva, and his buddies, his next door neighbors, his community members, they want to kill him. We don't want to hear about this. We have a similar situation, unfortunately, when Yirmiyah was prophesying about the first Churban. The Jews tried to kill him. They imprisoned him. They didn't want to hear the bad news that's coming. Everybody wants to live their own good life. And if the bad things happen, let them happen. But I don't want to know about them ahead of time. So his countrymen wanted to kill him. So he has no help. It's him and maybe his 3 boys. But again, 3 boys. He starts building the teva when he's 480. He doesn't have any children. When he turns 500, his oldest is born. When his oldest is born, he can't help him build the teva. So for a good period of time, Noach's working on this by himself. It takes him 120 years to build the teva. So why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu trouble him for 120 years to build the teva? Let him just make the same miracle. Noach go out and build a teva that's 10 amos long, 5 amos wide. Noach says, Rebbeinu Shalom, how might I get the animals on it? Don't worry, Noach, when the time comes, they'll fit on. So Rashi, in the name of the Medrash, says that this was an intentional plan by the Rebbeinu Shalom, that Noach should work on the teva for 120 years. So this way, for 120 years, Noach, every time someone comes over to Noach and says, what in the world are you doing? He can give Mamos Shmuz. The world's going to be destroyed. Everybody has to do tshuva. I'm getting onto this teva with my family, with animals, and a new world's going to be started. You better do tshuva, you better do tshuva. And he's giving you Musa for 120 years about the world being destroyed and everybody needs to do tshuva. So that's why the Rebbeinu Shalom did this, to give the world 120 years to do tshuva and 120 years for Noach to give his Musa Shmuz. Now, 120 years worth of the same Musa Shmuz just means that no one's listening to you at all. Noach is talking when he's 480 years, I'm starting to build this teva. The world's going to be destroyed because of your Avevis. You're all mushchasim. Okay. A year goes by, 2 years go by, 10 years go by, 20 years go by, 30 years go by, and people are saying, what are you still doing? He says, what do you mean what I'm still doing? The world's going to be destroyed. You have to do tshuva. The world's going to be destroyed, you have to do tshuva. The person says to him, Noach, laws up already. You're talking about this for 30 years already. For 30 years, you're calling us mushchasim, and you're telling us the world's going to be destroyed. Everyone's enjoying life. Why don't you join us and already, like Gua, why don't you calm down with the Musa Shmuz already? It's 30 years. You're talking the same thing. Nothing happens. Stop already. Forget building the teva and come have a good time with us. And 40 years go by, 50 years go by, 80 years go by. And people are saying, Stama Michigan. Stama Michigan. He's saying that God spoke to him. We're all mushchasim. He's normal. And he's building a teva because the world's going to be destroyed. He's talking about this for 80 years already. Where's the God? With Stam Meshiga, have Rahmanas on this person. Just leave him alone, Stam Meshiga. What does God gain by having this go on for 120 years? This doesn't gain adherence to tshuva. This just undermines the whole message to do tshuva if nothing happens for 120 years. So the question becomes now, on top of that, did the plan fail? It looks like it failed. God's plan was give him Musa for 120 years, they'll do tshuva. Nobody did tshuva. It ends up that Noach, his wife, his 3 sons and their wives, the only ones that get on the table. Nobody gets on the table. So 120 years worth of Musa Shmuzin, God's going to destroy the world, do tshuva, went nowhere. The plan failed. So this is where we're going to start looking at what the teva is, and this will also fill in some gaps in that we didn't get to yet in the Das Tavunos, and some things that we learned about in the Das Tavunos, and some things we learned about in the Ramban yesterday in Bereshis. Okay, we're on page at the bottom right-hand corner. There's a Yud. So on page Yud, at the top of the page, it says, HaTeva me'ein olam b'ze'er anpin. The teva wasn't just a place where Noach and his family were able to escape the Mabul. The teva, during the 12 months, there was only 40 days and 40 nights of rain, but the whole story of the Mabul, from the time Noach went into the teva till he can get out of the teva, till he got out of the teva was a year. The teva wasn't just a hiding place for Noach and his family. It wasn't a place, a safe abode for Noach and his family. In fact, while the world was being destroyed around the teva became the world. It became the microcosm of the world. We mentioned today, and we mentioned several times this week, the Ramchal taught us that the rule of Shlomo HaMelech in Koheles, Ein Kol Chodesh Tachas HaShemesh, there'll be nothing new under the sun. Either things were created and they're here, or the potential for those things to be created were already here. But there's not going to be something completely new that was neither here nor here in potential. That's something we've been talking about for days in the Ramchal. In order for the world to come back into existence as we knew it after the Mabul, there had to be a world during the Mabul. God is not going to create a whole new world after the Mabul. Why? Because Ein Kol Chodesh Tachas Hashemesh. So people talk about there was the world before the Mabul and a new world came after the Mabul. If they mean with those words that the world after the Mabul is a whole new creation, they are absolutely wrong. God does not create the world again. God, before he created this world, we have in Kabbalah that God was creating and destroying worlds, but then when this world became the world, there's Ein Kol Chodesh Tachas Hashemesh. This is it. Either it's here or here in potential. The idea that there is a world before the Mabul and God created a whole new world after the Mabul, if the intention of that statement is a brand new world, completely new, that didn't exist before the Mabul, that's a completely wrong statement. The world after the Mabul is a world that continued from the Teva. In other words, the Maharal is going to explain, there's the world before the Teva and the Mabul. The Teva became a microcosm of the whole world as it existed before the Mabul. The whole world is inside the Teva. Whatever Teva, whatever was in the Bria outside before the Mabul was now transferred by the Ribono Shel Olam inside the Teva. The whole Olam Hazeh, everything. It's being destroyed all around, but the Ikarim, the basic principles of the Teva, were now put into the Teva. When Noach comes out of the Teva, that Teva comes out of the Teva with him, and therefore the quote-unquote post-Mabul world is now a healthy continuation of the pre-Mabul world. So there's the pre-Mabul world destroyed. The good of the pre-Mabul world goes into the Teva, and after the Mabul and after Noach comes out of the Teva, that world of good that existed pre-Mabul comes out to continue this world of good. There is no real new world post-Mabul. So now and this is the yesod of the Maharal. The Teva wasn't just a hiding and safe abode for Noach. The Teva became Olam Hazeh for Noach. Hamaral B'Sifro Gur Aryeh, the caption at the top, Hateva Me'ein Olam B'Ze'er Ampin, the famous Zohar word Ze'er Ampin, a microcosm. The Teva inside it became a microcosm of the whole universe. Hamaral B'Sifro Gur Aryeh Posech Tzorha La'avonas Mashmu'usa Shel HaTeva B'Ofen Omok V'Yesodi. The Maharal in the Sefer Gur Aryeh opens for us a window to understand the full meaning and the depths of what was going on with the building of the Teva and living in the Teva. This is Rav Weinrod explaining the Maharal. This was not a place where Noach was saved only. God put into this Teva a small world, a microcosm of the world. You can see in the parentheses, Rav Weinrod put in microcosmos, microcosmos. She'ume'ein ha'olam shecharav, ume'ein ha'olam she'yibana shuv ba'asid. The Teva had in it characteristics of the world that was destroyed and characteristics of the world that was going to come about after the Mabul. It was sort of the connect point. There's not the old destroyed world and the new world. The Teva was a microcosm of the world and connected the old world to quote unquote the new world. And so we learn in the Medrash Tanchuma, a very interesting Medrash Tanchuma. Ki amila Noach neskeve sholosh pa'am b'psichas haparsha. Noach's name is mentioned 3 times in the pasuk. Eila told us Noach. It's the first pasuk in the parsha. Eila told us Noach. 1. Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya b'darisa. 2. Noach. Esolakim is halach Noach. Again Noach. Shekein Noach roa shlosh olamos. The Medrash says the reason why Noach's name is mentioned 3 times in the first pasuk of the parsha is because we're dealing with 3 Noachs. There's a Noach who saw the world before the Mabul, the Noach who saw the world in the Teva, and the Noach who saw the world after the Teva. Shekei Noach roa shlosh olamas. Noach saw 3 worlds. Olam b'yeshuvai, the Olam when it was settled, pre-Mabul. Olam b'churbanai, the world when it was destroyed and existed inside the Teva. V'shuv Olam b'yeshuvai, and again the world stable and settled. You see from this Medrash that the Medrash is considering Noach living in the Teva as a world in and of itself. There's the Noach mentioned 3 times in the pasuk. There's the world that Noach saw before the Mabul. There's the world that Noach saw inside the Teva while the world was being destroyed. And then there's the world that Noach saw after the Mabul. So inside the Teva is a world. This is not just a safer boat for Noach. During the Mabul, the Teva was a microcosm of the whole universe. Shekain ha'olam shenivra acharei hamabel yonek es koich chiyusayim oisi yetzira chad pa'amit. There was creation only once. This is the Ramchal's Ein Kol Chodesh Tachas HaShemesh. Worlds created only once. Shenoitzra b'mayma Hashem be'espriyas ha'olam b'sheshim me'amayis. The worlds created once during the 6 days of creation through Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Rakia. There's no more Vayomer Elokims. After the Mabul, it doesn't say Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Rakia. He didn't create the world again with Asar Mamoris. The world that was created with Asar Mamoris continued to exist after Noach left the table. But where was it? For example, the Medrash tells us that during the 12 months of the Mabul, that the Mazolos in heaven, the stars, the sun, the moon, they ceased moving. The world came to a stop. The planets were not moving in orbit. There's no sun, there's no moon moving. Okay, so that literally means that there's no world. The sun is not moving, the moon is not moving, there's no day, there's no night, nothing. Where was there day and night? There was day and night. What happened to Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or? What happened to Vayavdel Elokim ben Or ben Achoshev? That is why the Maharal explains. The pasuk says, Tzorat Hasa LaTeva. Noach was told to make a window at the top of the teva. What did this? Tzorat Hasa LaTeva. He made a window at the. Okay, well, let's not get it exactly. He made the window. Okay, but one manda oma that Rashi brings down is Tzorat Hasa LaTeva means he hung up some kind of large diamond or some other jewel, and this jewel gave off light during the day, and at night it stopped giving off light, this big diamond or whatever it is. And that's how Noach knew when it was day and he knew when it was night. So what was going on in the Teva? The Maharal says that this, whatever it was, diamond that he hung up in the Teva was now his sun and moon. In other words, the sun and the moon that are no longer functioning outside the Teva because the world's being destroyed, the whole Teva of the world's coming into the Teva, and the Teva is going to have day and night, and it's going to have day and night through a lighting fixture that's in the ceiling, like the sun and the moon that's in the heaven. And so the world, that's just an example, the whole structure of the world that was created in Sheshes Mei Bereshis They're going to be destroyed outside, but they're going to go in a microcosmic way into the Teva. And when Noach leaves the Teva, it's all going to come back out again, and now to continue the world in a beautiful way. But you can't talk about the world being recreated from scratch. That doesn't happen, and it didn't happen. That's what he explains at the bottom of the page. In order to create a microcosm inside the Teva, for an example, you need light. You need day and night. You need sun and the moon. So the Rebbeinu Shalom told Noach, Tzara Tasal Teva. One explanation is to put this diamond or whatever up in the ceiling, and now you have like a sun and the moon. It's still the Teva of the Sheishis Yimei Bereshis went into the Teva. On the next page, page Yud Aleph, the Maharal explains, Rav Weinberg explains through the Maharal that these are not measurements. If you take a look, you don't have that part on your scan. I apologize. Rav Weinberg quotes in an earlier piece in Noah the famous quote from the Maharal that he talks about in many places: "Devorim gedolim einam b'mikra." Important things are not coincidental. Whatever he means in that context. But what is being said here is HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Noach to build a teva that's 300 long, 50 wide, 30 high. Let's see. If the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Noach to use these specific measurements, we know these specific measurements have nothing to do with area. 300 long, 50 wide, 30 high will not fit in the hundreds of millions of animals and birds. They will not fit it in. God's going to have to make a miracle. So why did God tell Noach to build it? Let him make something small. So for 120 years, he'll try to give a Musa Shmuz that doesn't work out at the end anyways, which hopefully we'll have time to get to as well. But Devarim Gedolim Einam B'mikra, if the Rebbeinu Shalom is going to use a miracle to fit everyone on the Teva, so why did he pick the numbers 350 by 30? Why didn't he pick 350 by 75 by 40? The Rebbeinu Shalom, Devarim Gedolim Einam B'mikra. It's not just coincidental. 300 by 50 by 30. Okay, guy Vita. For a lot of us, we have to go Vita because we don't understand, as we learned the Ramban yesterday, we don't understand the full depths of these psukim. And we can't figure out, is 300 important? Could the Teva have been 280? Yeah, it could have been 280, same miracle. Could the Teva have been 320? Yeah, it would have been the same miracle. So why did God pick 300? There's a Chachma Elyoina, there's something happening here with the number 300. The same thing is true with the width. The width is 50. There's something, could the width have been 40? Miracle. The width 50? Miracle. The width 90? Miracle. So why did God pick exactly 50? So Dvarim Gedolim Einam B'mikra. These things are not coincidental. And we're going to get an example in a moment of the number 50, why this is particularly important, and it'll connect into the Ramban we learned yesterday in the Bereshis Shir. One more medrash I need to introduce to you. And the medrash says, learns out from a pasuk, Kinam Tasa Es HaTeva, that Noach going on to the Teva was not just for his personal physical safety, and not only, as we just saw through the Maharal, to bring a microcosm of the world into the Teva so that post-Teva, there will be a continuation a good continuation of the old world, it had another purpose. The Noach, the Medrash says, the Teva was metaher Noach, it purified Noach. Noach had some issues that he needed to purify in his own spiritual life. And by building the Teva and living in the Teva, Noach was purified of these issues. What were these issues? We'll see in a moment. So the Teva's purpose was a physical, safe abode for Noach and his family. It was, as the Maharal explains, it was to be a place where there'd be the Maisa Bria, all of creation would go as a microcosm into the Teva, such as this diamond hanging from the ceiling, it was like a sun and a moon, so that when Noah came out of the Teva, what came out of the Teva was not going to be a new world, new creation. That doesn't happen. It was going to be the finest points of the world pre-Mabul, survived in the Teva during the Mabul, and came out after the Mabul for this post-Mabul world. The third thing happening with the Teva is that Noah is going through a self-purification process of certain spiritual issues that he had. So the Teva is a physical safety, it's a spiritual purification, and it also is the place where the whole world comes together in a microcosm so that it can again come out post-Mabul. Skip, I'm going now to page Yud Beis. Behetem li koron zeh, based upon the principles that we just learned through the Maharal, that the Teva became a microcosm of the whole universe, so that post-Mabul, the pre-Mabul good world can come back out. Mavayim HaMaharal b'Sifro Or Chodosh. The Maharal wrote a sefer called Or Chodosh. Or Chodesh is an explanation to Megillas Esther. Madua hayeroicha v'teva chamishim amo. However, it comes up, you'll see how it comes up in a minute, through his explanation in Megillas Esther, the issue of why was the Teva 50 amos, why? Why is the number 50? 40 is a miracle, 50 is a miracle, 60 is a miracle, 80 is a miracle. Why did God pick the number 50? Why did he pick 50? We're not dealing with why 300 is the length or 30 is the height. The Maharal is dealing with what is the significance of 50. Maharal may be a divrei medrash. This is a fascinating medrash. The Maharal quotes a medrash in the Yalkut Shimoni Esther. Ki Haman bikesh litlot et Mordechai dafkal eitz gavoa chamisha mama. The Megillah says that Haman put a board or a stick in his yard that was 50 amos high, and he was going to hang, his intention was to hang Mordechai on this stick, 50 amos high, this pole. Where do you get a 50 amma high pole from? They had it. The Medrash says, Shekain hayezeh eitz shepar shandasa beno notel min hateva. Chazal at Kabbalah. One of the 10 sons of Noach that's mentioned in the Megillah is Parshandasa. Parshandasa somehow came into possession of one of the boards of the Teva. And this board of the Teva was 50 amos wide. It was one of the boards that covered the width of the Teva. The boards that covered the length were 300. The boards that covered the width were 50 amos. Somehow or other, Parshandasa, Haman's son, had in his possession a 50 amma board, because it's a board that came from the Teva. Where did he get it from? I have no idea. But he had this, and this is the board from the Teva that Haman puts up in his yard, and this is the board from the Teva that he plans to hang Mordechai on. Hamaral Mavair, the Maharal there in Or Chodesh explains, Shalo lechinam nikbu protei hatev midaselu. Great things, important things, do not happen by coincidence. If God said 300 by 50 by 30, every number, even though it could have been different because it's a miracle either way, every single number is very specific because it represents something. Shekain ha'olam, this is now a quote from the Ral. Shekain ha'olam magia ad mem she'orim. The world can only go up 48 levels, 48 gates. We learned this yesterday in the Ramban Hakdama to the Torah in the Bereshit Shir. The Ramban quoted the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah that God created 50 gateways or pathways of Bina, and there's a pathway to understand birds, there's a pathway to understand the grass, there's a pathway to understand trees, a pathway to understand mankind. And Moshe Rabbeinu was taught all these pathways, and all these pathways are written in the Torah either expressly or written through gematrias and Sofei Tevis and Rashi Tevis. And a person like Moshe Rabbeinu, who's taught this by the Rebbeinu Shalom, sees all of this in the Torah. So if a person's goat is not doing well, you go to Moshe Rabbeinu and say, my goat is doing this and this, what do I do? Moshe Rabbeinu tell you what to do. But he never went to veterinary school. Yeah, but you learned the Torah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and everything is in there. To the extent that there's E equals MC squared, and if it's correct, it's in the Torah. You just have to find it in the Torah. The whole Maisa Habriya, all of science is in the Torah. The Asara Mamoris, God said, let there be light. Light means whatever light is, God created. It's in there. God said, let there be fish. That means every type of fish, God created it, the specific breathing capacity, with fins, without fins, with scales, without scales. This is all God making the decision. What kind of breathing system will the fish have? What kind of lungs will a human being have? All of this God creation. What does it need for a lung to be healthy? Kashom, a lung gets sick, what does it need to heal? All this is God's rules. And it's written in the Torah, which is the blueprint for the whole world. Moshe Rabbeinu was able to see this in the Torah because God taught him. Here's a gematria, here's a word, here's a pasuk. So we learned that the world was created with 50 Sharei Bina, 50 pathways to understand the world. They were all given to Moshe except one. One, gate 50, that's the gate, according to the Ramban. Ramban says it's possibly the gate where there is the understanding, quote unquote, of God. No one will ever open that gate. Nobody will ever understand the essence of God. So Moshe Rabbeinu was given 49 out of the 50. So the maximum that there can be in this world are 49 Sharei Bina, the 49 gates. The 50th gate is God's essence himself. So the Maharal explains that the reason why the number 50 was used by God, why it was used as the width, we're not discussing now. But the number 50 was an important number. This Teva is going to be what? This Teva is going to be not just a safe physical abode for Noah, and not just a spiritual purification for Noah. It's going to be the place where the world as it existed pre-Mabul is going to come back out post-Mabul. The world pre-Mabul is going to be destroyed. What's destroyed in there? The 49 levels of Madregas of Bina. The only person, the only entity that can save this situation is God himself. No one else can do what God did, like anything else really, but nobody can destroy a world, put the world in a microcosm inside the Taven and take it out afterwards. So the Maharal explains, the world, this world can only get to the 49th gate. The whole world was erased, flooded during the Mabul. The world was saved from something outside the world. In other words, the world has 49 in it. The world's being destroyed. There is no 49. To the extent that there's 49, it's going to go into the table. Now, what is actually going to save the world and create the world to go under the table? It must be something that comes from above the 49. The world was then directly saved through the 50th level, which is Kudsha Barichu Ba'atzmai, higher than the 49 of this whole world. Therefore, the Teva of Noach, Maharal says, had a number of 50 to teach us that the 49 Madregas that were pre-Mabul went into the Teva, they'll come out of the Teva, but you need something that's above the 49 and the whole Teva to bring it out post-Mabul into this quote-unquote new world. That's why this number 50. Okay, there's a lot of Kabbalah in here about the 50, but Hayotzim in the Vrenu here that these numbers are not just picked. There's reasons for it. So we had a lot of questions at the beginning. Did Noach fail? Why were these numbers picked? Etc. Why did only 8 people reside on the top floor? So let's take a look now at the final paragraph in this piece. Hateva misakenes es Noach. The Teva became a spiritual purification for Noach. It became a place where Noach sort of became perfected as a human being, although, like Adam, who was perfect and then fell to the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, Noach comes out of the Teva on a tremendous madrega, and then he falls prey to his wish to drink wine. So on page Yud-Beis, Hateva misakenes es Noach. The Teva was misaken Noach. Hine kichen. Noach omal meya ve'esim shama livnois me'ein olam zeh. Noach worked for 120 years to build a teva, into which teva a microcosm of pre-Mabul would go into. Ula'achamikan omal b'meshach shana tamima al kiyumoy. And for a full year inside the teva, he worked day and night that the world living inside the teva should have a kiyum. V'torach mi boiker ad leil. He was busy day night. Lahachis espalei achaim shaboy, to feed the animals, to take care of the animals, to take care of his family. 120 years it took him to build this structure, which would be a microcosm of the whole world, because he's going to bring out the world after the Mabul. It's a physical safety, and he's now learning how to take care of all the animals and his family for a whole year. In this teva is the microcosm of the whole world. Olam chesed yiboneh. God created the world with chesed. It's a world of chesed. The Ramchal at the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim, the Rebbeinu Shalom created the world. God created man in order to be Mahana man, so that man could be Nena Miziv Shchinasai. That's why God created man. Lehetiv, the words used in the Das Tavunas, to do good. So Olam Chesed Yiboneh. The foundation of the world is the Rebbeinu Shalom's will to do chesed. Okay. Now Noach is the Balabayas in the table. He's brought the microcosm of the pre-Mabul world into the table. He has to preserve that world in the table. And that's the world that's going to come out post-Mabul. What does Noach have to be? What is the midah that Noach has to learn inside the teva if he's going to be the one that's going to take care of pre-Mabul world during the Mabul and let it back out? In other words, he's going to, in some way, bring about creation again, not a new creation, but he's going to bring about the old world into this new world. He's going to bring about the best things of the old world and bring them out into the new world. How do you create worlds? So in that teva, Noach is being taught how to be a tremendous ish chesed. You're going to take care of animals day and night. You're going to take care of your families. You're going to clean the animals. You're going to feed the animals. You're going to learn that the world exists on chesed. Olam hazer ampin shel hateva hushsas eifo al chesed. Therefore, the foundation that lived inside the teva and upon which the teva was built was an olam chesed yibana. What was Noach busy doing in the teva? Lehetiv. He was busy doing good for others. He spent day and night making sure that everybody had food. And he was dealing with all kinds of animals, birds, animals, wild animals. We have the famous Rashi. He came late one day with feed the lion. He got a little bite. Tikne es Noach. Noach building the teva, and Noach living in the teva, and Noach taking care of others in the teva. was a ticket for Noach. Shekei Noach hayashut of mole lebniya shel olam b'zer anpin ulechesed sh'olav hushsas v'einulcha tikkun gadol miseh. Noach's problem was that when he came out of the teva, he was a different person. And had he been that person before the mabul may have never occurred. When he came out of the mabul, he starts having a conversation with the Ribono Shel Olam, and finally the Ribono Shel Olam makes a bris. He makes a covenant with Noach, and he tells Noach, I will never bring such a flood on the world again. Was it possible for Noach to have such a conversation with the Ribono Shel Olam and be a Melitz Yosher before the Mabul and pray? This is something raised in Sforim, raised in Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berditchev talks about in this week's Pasha. When the Ribono Shel Olam told Avram he's going to destroy Sodom, the Ribono Shel Olam, Avram Avinu is davening and davening and davening and davening, save Sodom, even though the people of Sodom are the diametric opposite of Avram Avinu. The way they live is his diametric opposite, but he's davening for them. We don't find Noach davening. Noach is building the teva, and people ask him, what are you doing? He's saying, you better do tshuva. If you don't do tshuva, you're going to die. We don't see Noach talking to Ribono Shel Olam, please. There's so many people here. We don't see him praying for people to do tshuva. We don't see him praying at all for the people. When he got out, he has a discussion with the Ribono Shel Olam that leads to the Ribono Shel Olam promising he'll never destroy the world with a mabul. Could have had that discussion beforehand. So Noach in the teva went through a purification process. He's building the teva for his physical safety. He's building the teva because he's bringing a microcosm of the whole world into the teva so that after a year, the best of the old world can come back out, and that he's going to be a better person when he comes back out. The person who didn't understand to pray for mankind before the mabul for a whole year was busy taking care of all the animals, all the birds, his family, feeding them, cleaning them for a whole year, and he became an ish chesed. He became an ish chesed. He left the mabul. He says, Ribono Shel Olam, and they're going back and forth. Ribono Shel Olam says, I'm not going to ever destroy the world again with a mabul. So the teva served multiple purposes. The summation of the Maharal is at the bottom of page Yud Beis. Nimtza l'meidem, therefore we learn, ki Noach lo bona teva greda. Noach didn't just build some teva so that he can live on it in safety. He built a microcosm of the old world. Now, why did the top floor have to be so big? Why couldn't you just put Noach in a suite for 8 people? He's bringing the old world into the teva. The top floor of the teva is now a microcosm of the whole planet Earth, where all of mankind needs to live. Mankind doesn't live in a suite. Mankind lives in a world, the whole planet Earth. The whole planet Earth went to the top floor of the teva, but there were only 8 people there. Okay, when Adam and Chava were created, there were only 2 people there, but you still needed a whole planet. Noach brought planet Earth into the teva so that when the mabul is over, he can bring out a planet that mankind can propagate on again. There's enough room symbolically for man to reproduce and create a planet Earth again. So man doesn't live in a suite. He brought into the world a zer anpin. Shehikbil b'mahusai uvesai kiyumay la'olam hamamashi shehiskayim l'fnei hamabul v'Hashem iskayim acharo. He had to bring onto the teva a microcosm of the world as it existed before the mabul and as it will exist post-mabul. Ba'olam b'zer anpin shehiskayim b'teva, in that microcosm world that was brought into the teva, nignazu koiches hayetzir halokim, were hidden in there all of God's creation, all the Asura Mamores, Vayom Elokim Yehi Or, Vayom Elokim Yehi Rakia, Vayom Elokim Tachi Oretz Desha. All of that was brought in because God is not going to do the Asura Mamores again and create a whole new world. So all of this has to be brought onto the table. And they're hidden there in the table. All these godly creations, all this teva is in there. Shalem Hushas Olam Achrei Mabul. And after the mabul, the world is going to be based, and the foundation of the world is going to be based upon what was brought into the table. Mikan hak pod al protei teva. Therefore, the Torah is very makbid on how the teva is going to be built. A top floor for only 8 human beings, because the top floor represents the whole planet Earth for human beings, etc. The Torah is makbid, it's makbid on the size, the 30, 50, the 300. We had an example of why it's 50 with the pole of Mordechai. The Maral gave us an example of the diamond hanging from the ceiling. Rebbeinu Shalom already built a teva. Rebbeinu Shalom told Noach to build a teva, 300 by 50 by 30. The whole thing's a miracle to begin with. Rebbeinu Shalom can't give him some light in there. He has to put up a diamond, because the teva inside is not a nes. The teva has to represent inside the teva of the world that's going to come out post-Mabul. And so Rebbeinu Shalom has him hanging this, what looks like a sun or a moon in the ceiling, and it lights during the day and it goes off at night. When he comes out of the teva, the sun and the moon start operating again in heaven. During the 12 months of the Mabul, the sun and the moon did not operate. Noach comes out of the teva. The power that the Rebbeinu Shalom put into this diamond that was the sun and the moon during the 12 months now comes back out and goes back to the sun and the moon. Everything that God created was lahativ, to benefit mankind. Al kain amal Noach betikana olam shu oisek b'teva miboker ad leil l'lo hafuga. Therefore, the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Noach, you're going to go into this teva and you're going to become a better person. When everybody gets out of the teva, it's going to be a better world, and you're going to be a better person for it, because you're going to spend time doing chesed in this teva that you didn't fully understand before you went into the teva. So it's going to be a better world with better people, including you, Noach. Gemilas chesed are prayers. I'm doing gemilas chesed with creation. V'zehu tikunei shaloi. And that became the perfection of Noach. It's an amazing maral, and Rav Weinberg presents it in an amazing way. It's a longer piece. All the kashas are basically answered. We don't have time to go through each kasha. We got the basic understanding. The teva is not some box or ship to save Noach from a flood. It is built with specific measurements, because they represent specific inyane ruchnius. It's a place where Noach and his family are physically saved. It's a place where Noach becomes spiritually purified and becomes an ish hachesed, because you can build a world unless you're an ish hachesed. And it's also a place that becomes between the two events, pre-Mabul, post-Mabul. It is the connect point where the pre-Mabul world, the good points of the pre-Mabul world go into the teva. The teva goes into the teva, and then it comes out after the Mabul to start the world in a healthy place again. There's a tremendous amount to learn from this maral in terms of what we're seeing and going through. Sometimes we look at the world as in a state of destruction. Today, the ruchnius destruction, the gashmius destruction, the physical, corona, everything, all the physical problems, all the ruchnius problems, and the ruchnius problems that have been caused by the gashmius problems of the corona. And we look at it and we say that the world, it's a mabul. And people use those words. There's a mabul outside. The world's being destroyed. Yeah, nay, I don't know. But we always have to understand that when these things happen, there's the pre-Mabul, there's the post-Mabul. And during the Mabul, what we're supposed to be doing is taking the best of pre-Mabul and getting ready as soon as the Mabul is over to release the best of the pre-Mabul that we have and bring about a better world post-Mabul, be better people post-Mabul. And we see here from the Maral and from Rav Weinberg that the way we prepare during this Mabul period is chesed. Chesed, chesed, chesed. That's how the Rebbeinu Shalom built the world. That's the lesson he taught Noach in the Teva. Noach, you're going to take care of others. You're going to be worried about others, not just your kids and your daughter-in-laws and your wife. You're going to take care of animals. You're going to take care of feeding lions. You take care of feeding the beautiful birds. Noach, night and day, becoming an ish chesed. And he came out of the table, and he was a different person. The Medrash, as we said, learns from a pasuk that the teva became like a mikveh for Noach. It purified him. He became an ish chesed, and an ish chesed can build a world. So during the period of a mabul, whether you want to consider the time that we're living in a mabul, all the physical issues, the spiritual issues, the intertwining of the physical and spiritual issues, call it a mabul, don't call it a mabul. But during the mabul, Noach went into a teva. And in that teva, he was taught to be an ish chesed. That ish chesed means that you're going to care for animals and care for their well-being and care for their safety and feed them on time. The Svarim say that this thing that Noach built is called a teva, a box. The word teva also means a word. And so many Svarim talk about the idea that when there's a physical or spiritual mabul outside, Noach built a physical box, teva. But there are times when there's a physical, spiritual mabul outside, and every one of us can build a teva. And that teva is the word of the Torah. During the time of the mabul, of physical or spiritual degradation, a person can build his own teva. You learn Torah, the words of the words of the Torah become your teva. And that teva that we build is based upon Olam Chesed Yibanim. The Torah itself has a level of Torah's Chesed. If you sing Eishes Chayil to your wife every Leil Shabbos, which I assume you do, it's one of at the end of Mishlei, we say in Eishes Chayil, Torah's Chesed al Lashonah. There is a Torah of Chesed on her tongue. And the Gemara in Sukkah asks, "V'chi yesh Torah shel Chesed, v'chein Torah she'eina shel Chesed." What does Shlomo Melech mean? The Torah of Chesed. Is there Torah that is Chesed and Torah that's not Chesed? So the Gemara says, "Torah l'lamda zu Torah shel Chesed, Torah lo l'lamda zu Torah she'eina shel Chesed." The Torah that a person learns to share with others, to teach others, to make others better, to make the community better, is called Torah's Chesed. It's not just Torah, it's a Torah of Chesed. It's not Torah shel Chesed, as Rav Hutner points out in the Maimah. It's not Torah with some Chesed. The whole Torah that you're teaching changes. The word Chesed in the pasuk is an adjective. Torah's Chesed, not Torah shel Chesed. Torah's Chesed. It's Torah Chesed. It's one. It's the whole Torah changes. It's the Torah it's the teva. Instead of the box of Noach, it's the teva, the words in the Torah. And when those words in the Torah are used for chesed, to make yourself better, to make others better, we learned this in Rav Kook yesterday in the Shir. When we were talking about the Gemara in Seidah Daf Hey, Ani Estaka, Iti Daka. What was the Torah given for? For you to make yourself perfect and live in an ivory tower, or for you to work on yourself and give of yourself and make sure that other people are better physically and spiritually. And the Maskon in the Gemara, the Rav Kook learned the Gemara was, the tachlis of the world is that people make themselves better, but that making yourself better is not for yourself. You're making yourself better and you're learning so that others can benefit. Others will be healthy. Others will be spiritually well. That's the tachlis of a human being. So Noach went into the teva, and he looks like a self-consumed person. He didn't daven for his door before he got onto the teva. The Rosh Hashanah made sure that on the teva he was consumed night and day with taking care of others, including animals, and suddenly he became concerned about the physical welfare of others and his own spiritual welfare. He became Ish HaChesed after he left. So when we look at the outside, we have a teva, there's a mabul, you want to call it that, whatever the descriptive title, there's a mabul. Mabul physical, Mabul spiritual, they interconnect with each other. Soyer Tasela Teva. In the Teva, you have to have a shining light. You have to shine into the Torah. You have to take the light out of the Torah. And from the Torah, you become the Ish HaChesed, and you can, even the Torah becomes Torah's Chesed. When you're concerned about others, the Torah becomes Torah's Chesed. And I keep on saying the words concerned about others. What was Noach's lesson in the Torah? Noach, you're going to spend a year worrying about your family and worrying about animals. Make sure they're fed on time. And when you miss the feeding, the lion will bite you. You're going to make sure they're fed on time. You're going to make sure they're healthy. You're going to make sure they're physically well. And you are going to become an Ish Chesed. That's the message of the Torah. That's what Noach spent a year doing. So to the extent that we're going to say there's a Mabul outside, physical, spiritual Mabul, it's time that each of us became Ish Chesed or Isha Chasida, meaning basic. We're worried about others physically. We're worried about others spiritually. What can I do to help others? You can do Noach, 120 years, scream at them and say, if you don't do tshuva, you're dead. It's one thing. Didn't work. 120 years didn't work. But you can then go on to the Teva and become a Ish Chesed. And Ish Chesed means you're going to care about others, even if it means animals. And Nebuch, there's a problem here in Eretz Yisrael sometimes. There's even a sign down my block. Do not torture cats. There's sometimes a game you see, not so much anymore. It used to be more prevalent in Beit Shemesh. I don't see it that often. Little kids like to find little baby cats and do awful things with them. What kind of child do you think that's going to grow up into? You think the only thing it'll torture and pain and abuse is a cat? What do you think that child at 6 is going to be at 13 and at 19 and at 25 and as a husband or a wife? Chesed has to be taught at the earliest age. It makes the person. It makes the person. It's what created the world. Olam Chesed Yibon. So when we go out and we think about Chesed and Noach's Teva, Noach was self-consumed with making sure all the animals and his family were well and physically healthy. So when the Misrad HaBriyut, the doctors, or the world health profession, and I know there are these people out there that say that the corona is a flu. And then they have percentages. No, I read this, somebody wrote this. I think I know who it is. But it pains me to even believe that it's a person, but every indication I have it's that person. The person wrote, all right, corona's around 7.5 months. In 7.5 months, Nebuch, 2,200 Jews died in Eretz Yisrael. And then he does statistics, 2,200 Jews in 7 months. How many Jews is that per month? About 300 Jews. He says, is that an epidemic? Is that a pandemic? Because 300 people died a month. You know how many people died a month during the Spanish flu? People are exaggerating this. It's some kind of flu. Everybody take it easy. Everybody should go back to work. Everybody should run their lives as it was before the Mabul. Make believe there's no Mabul. Rabbi Say, Parshas Noach is here. We understand what Noach did in that tape. He became concerned about the welfare of animals and other human beings, and because of that, he was zeicha to walk out of the teva and see a new beautiful world. If he didn't learn that lesson, he would have not been allowed off that teva in the year. It would have taken 2 years, could have taken 10 years, but if he had been messing around in the teva, first of all, the animals probably would have eaten him up. One animal bit him. But if he didn't learn that lesson, he wouldn't be allowed off the teva. So people talk about what exact therapy are we going to have? When is the vaccine going to be ready for the corona? And we wish science all the mazel in the world to come up with a vaccine through their hishtadlus that we always talk about. And nothing's going to work unless the Rabbeinu Shalom makes it work. And President Trump, in an amazing statement, I think he said it twice in a speech about a week ago. He was talking about Corona publicly at some kind of campaign event, and he said, in order for this to go away, we need help from the boss. And he pointed up to Shamayim, and he said it a second time. He said, I know I'm going to be criticized by the liberals, but I'm going to say it again. The Corona is not going away until the boss says it's going away. But there's a hishtadlus that we always talk about. So we wish and bless the scientists, the doctors, they should come up with a vaccine. And with Rebbeinu Shalom's blessing, the vaccine should have no side effects and it should cure us. But how will we get the blessing of the Rebbeinu Shalom on the hishtadlus? What will make the human hishtadlus to find the vaccine work? What do we need to do so that the Rebbeinu Shalom will say, this vaccine will work and have no side effects? What do we need to do to leave this mabul and get off the table and get out of the bidud? Each of us has, we have a table. We sit in our homes. Sometimes we go outside when we should. Otherwise, we're living in a table. And those in bidud are zich in a table. What do we need to do so we can get out of bidud, that we can get out of the tavis and have back the world, the best of the world that was pre-mabul? What do I need to do so that HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses the human efforts? I need to do what Noach did on the table. I need to become an ish chesed, isha chassid. And what was the chesed that Noach learned? How to take care of others, to be concerned even for animals, their health and their safety. So Rabbi say, forget about all the tangential things. The masks work, the mask doesn't work. There is no corona. It's a corona, but it's only a flu. 99.99999% of people recover. A couple of people die. Statistically, it's not a big thing because the Spanish flu was worse. This is not Torah. It's shtuyot in the Olam HaTorah. It's shtuyot. And unfortunately, some of the shtuyot we're hearing from people with long beards and long payas and occupy very, very prestigious position. Shtuyot. We have to become people of chesed. Like Noach was forced to become on the teva, and be concerned about the next person. You'll wear a mask. If you have symptoms, you get tested. There's this whole movement, don't get tested. Just stay home and don't get tested. We become people of chesed. Noach, people of chesed. And through that, we show our care for other human beings. We take the precautions that keep ourselves healthy, as we talked about so many times, which is self, the Ratzon Hashem. The last, as we spoke about, the last siman, the last two halachas in Choshen Mishpat, the Beis Yosef talks about a person not allowed to put himself in sakana. If a person does something and puts himself in sakana, you whip him, makas mardus. We talked about the Ber Hagola, about how it's not avodas Hashem to keep your body healthy. But now we're going a step further. You want to get out of the mouth. You have to learn Noach's lesson on the table. You have to learn how to take care of others. Even the animals, you have to learn how to take care of them. Follow the whole road for yourself, to protect others. If you go to a place, I was invited to a Sheva Brachas this week. I went there. I went on the porch. I said Mazel Tov, and I left. It wasn't exactly the exact distancing, mask, etc. I said Mazel Tov. I left. That's for my benefit, for their benefit. Everybody become ish chesed, isha chasida. Care about yourself. Care about the next person. Spread physical safety to others. Spread spiritual growth for others. Teivas chesed. And with that chesed, we'll be able to rejuvenate the world that was first created for Olam Chesed Yimoneh. David HaMelech says in Tehillim, we should be zeicher to do all the chesed we need to do. Somebody came to me yesterday. I'll give you a simple example. Somebody came to me yesterday and said that Reuven came to me yesterday and said that Shimon, a very good friend of his, desperately needs a loan to be able to pay his mortgage. Can't pay his mortgage. And whatever, he's going to get into problems with the bank. So Reuven said to me, the famous rule. I have the 7,000 shekel to lend him, but I don't have 7,000 shekel that I can afford to lose. Right? That's one of the rules. When you lend money, you have it in case it's not paid back. So the person said, Ruben said, I have this 1,000 shekel to lend. I don't have it to lose. And he asked me if I would draft a shtar halva. Okay. At the end, we talked about chesed. The chesed that is done during this period of time. A person that's honest. Ruven absolutely trusts Shimon. He's honest. He's fine. He's not going to drain him a cup. The chesed that can be done in this Mabul time is unbelievable. And the person Ruven did make the loan, and Shimon shined the shtar, and Shimon will pay him back in Mir Hashem. The chesed that is available to do in these days is unbelievable. And the most basic chesed is, I am not going to take a chance on infecting you. And therefore I'm doing X, Y, Z, and I won't do X, Y, Z. Baruch Shalom, that for the Baruch Shalom, that I believe will be the bracha, the source of the bracha that will eventually bring about the cure of the corona, not because we become ish chesed, because the world runs on teva. The teva of pre-Mabul went on to the teva. And when the teva came out post-Mabul, we're in a world of mitzias and teva. There will be a vaccine. And the faster we learn the lesson of chesed, the quicker the vaccine will be blessed, in my opinion. All you need Yeshua Shab Yeshua, all you need Yeshua Shab Yeshua, all you need Nechama Shab Nechamas, all you need Baruch Shab, all the brachas in the world, Baruch Yeshua Nechamas Yeshua can only come from the Baruch Shalom when he wants, how he wants, do he wants, because he's the Yachid Echad and Yuchad. When we understand this and internalize this, we do a Gilei Yachid for ourselves in our own lives, and as more and more Yidden do this and understand and internalize it, we have a greater and greater Gilei Yichud, as the Ramchal teaches in the Astabunos. Eventually, the Gilei Yichud becomes so overpowering in this world that Mashiach comes to finish the job of Gilei Yichud. You should come and have your menu. Everybody do those things that are safe and correct and proper within the rules and based upon your age and precondition, etc. And it's a chesed. It's a chesed for you and it's a chesed for everybody around you. And we should be zeicha to leave this Mabul and be able to walk out of the teva into this new beautiful world that is mamish waiting for. It's mamish waiting for us to leave the teva and get off and enjoy it. Everybody have a wonderful day and a wonderful Shabbos Kodesh.